Hi, everybody. Welcome to ASIS TV with their host, Chuck Harold. My special guest today, Mr. Garrett McCreen. We're going to talk about Israeli security best practices. Welcome to the show, Garrett.
Thanks for having me.
Let's tell people what exactly Israeli security best practices are.
Israeli security best practices are key fundamental things or procedures or concepts or ways of thinking in the security world that are universal concepts that should apply to all environments, most of which have originated in Israel through their security apparatus, and many of which have been perfected here in the United States.
Garrett, give me some examples of security best practices in Israel that are very successful that we don't utilize here.
There's one acceptable form of identification, and everybody has to carry that form of identification. So that's a very, very simple thing. Currently, when you go to, for example, again, the airport, and before you pass through security, your identification is checked. However, the ID doesn't actually know what your ID is supposed to look like. Meaning I could have an identification from any state in any country, or anything really. Any ID would be sufficient for me to pass through that security checkpoint. So that's a simple, easy little thing. Another detail is metal detectors. Okay, you find metal detectors and rings of security around common structures, soft targets, high profile areas. Another good example is the simple fact that everybody in Israel, both men and women, when they turn 18 years old, they conscript to national service. That could mean military service, law enforcement service, fire rescue, and that means everybody is a participant in the security of the state. So whether you're in service or you're a veteran, you are familiar with and you understand and you have awareness of the security situation.
Talk to me about their screening process at the airports. It's the most successful in the world.
Well, the answer is that here in the United States, when you pass through TSA or similar, they are very interested in finding a means of attack. They're interested in finding a weapon, a Leatherman tool, a large pair of scissors, razor blades. That's their interest, is finding this tool. And they believe if they find this tool, then they have interest is in finding the perpetrator, not finding the means. So regardless of whether or not you have in your bag a Leatherman tool, right, they're more interested in getting a feel for your reaction, getting a feel for your personality, getting a feel for your demeanor, for your attitude, and determining if you are an adversary. And then secondary to that is determining if you have the means. So I think that's a reversal. But however, here in the United States, we rely very, very heavily on technology to do the job, such as the X-ray machines that we all have to get in now at the airport that spins around you and X-rays your whole body, right? So that's a tremendous dependence on technology. Whereas in Israel, I believe, from my experience, they certainly rely a lot more on manpower.
Well, I agree with this approach 100%. But human intelligence is the most important, and it really reminds me of just basically kind of a cop on the street and, hey, what's your name? Where are you going? What you doing? Because watching people's reactions is the key. And the other thing I think is interesting is a bad guy can get into an airport with no weapons at all and improvise once he's behind the screening process. And I think this is something we don't think about enough in the United States.
The intent of somebody requires another somebody to determine or ascertain or to value on some scale. However, means are more binary. So this requires a lower level of training. The bar to entry for screeners and other security personnel, armed security guards, licensed guards around the country, the bar to entry is a very low bar to entry. So because of that, they become wholly dependent on technology to make binary decisions. Whereas in the Israeli security model, the bar to entry is very high. So they're using a human factor to make threat, no threat determinations.
Garrett, in my 35 years in this business, I have never heard it put so well, so clearly. That is absolutely the core of the success in this model. Now, here's my question to you. Don't all of us know these things intuitively? Can't we look at our spouse and say, uh-oh, something's wrong over there. I better not open my mouth or I'm in big trouble. We know this in our personal lives. Our intuition is good at this. Why aren't we in the United States taking that baseline of what every human knows and then moving that training to include how it's done in Israel? I think we would be successful here. But you're absolutely right. We put a guard out there for minimum wage and say, push this button, look at the x-ray. That's not security.
We have to maintain here in North America a balance between security and personal freedom, between security and privacy. And what you find is that most people prefer the appearance of security rather than the hassle of actual security.
I think the other thing we're sensitive to here is lawsuits and being called out as, being prejudiced. And so if I ask you, hey, where are you going? I'm going to get accused of racial profiling or something. And I think we're just way off the mark on that. But to the average person looking at how it's done in Israel, I could see how someone in America would think that's profiling. Can you distinguish those two for us and tell us why they're not the same thing?
Well, in Israel, they do, in fact, profile. However, the profiling is not motivated by one's ethnic or racial background. The profiling is motivated by one's actions, by one's belongings, by one's demeanor, by the way one reacts to being confronted. If you confront somebody with nefarious intentions, the way they're going to react is going to be markedly different than someone with genuine intentions. And so, yes, of course, there is profiling, but profiling